Okay. How are you?
I'm great, man. How's it going?
Good. Good. So I thought we could jump on and do a quick market update. It's been a while since we've done one of these, and everybody seems to be asking us, "What's the market?" I mean, every time I don't know about you, everywhere I go, it's "What's the market like? What's the market like?"
Well, that's the question that everyone will ask you at every family gathering, awkward uh, play dates with kids and all that fun stuff. But I don't know, it's kind of relevant now. I think we're seeing some shifts and some changes, some things that are a little out of the ordinary here for the last few years. So
Yeah.
probably a good time to bring everyone up to speed on what we're seeing.
Yeah. So I want to obviously talk about the current market, but kind of take us back, maybe this time last year, towards the end of 2022. And I know you and I were talking back then, and all of these pundits, if you will, experts were saying, oh man, 2023, that's the year, man. That's the year the prices drop. It's going to be a buyer's market. And they could not have been more wrong, right?
Yeah, not really any of those came true. I mean, I think there are a few maybe select markets that saw a bit of a dip, but nothing extraordinary to get real excited about or up
Yeah.
in arms.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. So I wanted to give you some data. Go ahead.
what I was gonna say was like I don't know where these predictions like come from. I know they stem from like a variety of different areas, but I just feel like too many people automatically rush to assume that if the economy takes a dip, it's going to be driven by the real estate market like 08, 09. I don't know. I just don't feel like we can predict something like that again. Like if the economy takes a toll elsewhere, I think the real estate market will be kind of a byproduct of that and it won't be driven by that. So I don't know. I never really bought into hype of like these over dramatized uh, like guesses on how extreme it might change, but we really haven't seen a whole heck of a lot other than interest rates rising.
Yeah. You know what it does is it drives clicks, it drives views online, right? It's a great headline for these news outlets to use. Oh, the market crash that's coming, and it's to me, it's just sensationalism.
Yeah. I am curious, like I admittedly don't spend a ton of time researching, the California housing market or some of these bigger cities than Cleveland, right? I try to spend my time looking here. Like I do wonder if there are other areas that might be experiencing a little more than maybe what we have here, what data you've got, which I'm curious to see. But
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, maybe that's where that comes from. It could be a lot different in other areas. I don't really think that it is, just from my like general perception of trying to pay a little bit of attention to what's going on in the world. But I'm definitely curious.
Yeah. So that kind of is a good segue. So what we're going to look at today is numbers and data, as we always do. We're going to start out at a macro level, like national, right? National numbers, and kind of break it down as we go along regionally, and even strict, right down to Cuyahoga County, which is where we live. And anybody who's watching this that's thinking about buying or selling and living in Cleveland, that's what you really want to see. So let's go ahead and start with the sort of the national numbers here. Hang on one sec while I pull this up and we can kind of go through it. So again, I want to kind of that everybody in December, if you remember, was talking about it. And it wasn't just experts; it was like buyers that we were working with, right? They were saying, "Man, I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait till next year because that's when the prices are going to dip." And it's just so interesting to see what actually happened, from Q1 all the way up until now. So I'll just get your reaction to this. These are the companies that get paid a lot of money to make predictions, and it's not I guess reasonable for them to be wrong or be slightly off. But as you can see, like all of the major companies, Fannie Mae, Morgan Stanley, Zillow. This was their forecast for 2023 that they came up with last December. And as they saw the numbers coming in, they've now changed their forecast. And this is home prices, right? So, for instance, Zillow thought nationally we were going to see a 0.7% dip in home prices. And now they're saying, oh, sorry, it's actually 5.5% appreciation in home prices in 2023. Your thoughts?
I mean, I see this 15 to 20% prediction here. What? What was that all about? Um,
Yeah,
yeah, this data doesn't really surprise me. I mean, and this is nationally. Um,
correct.
yeah, this doesn't shock me, although I mean, there's quite a bit of volatility in some of these guesses. I mean, I guess most of them are between, 0.5% to 4, but those one AEI, they got it wrong.
Yeah, they did. And I
Um,
think if you think about it back in December, I think their projections were, hey, we're going to get somewhat back to normalcy, right? If you could think about the last 3 years, it's just been unicorns, right? From a real estate perspective. Like it's almost like you can't even take that data into consideration because it's so different than what's happened over the last 40, 50, 60 years of real estate that it's like maybe they thought, hey, we're going to get back to some normalcy and interest rates will kind of stabilize and people will list their house and we'll get back to somewhat of a normal market. And obviously, over the last couple of years, we've seen record growth in home equity and appreciation. And I think it was okay to project it like that's got to stop, right? And I think that's probably where some of this is coming from. But I don't think they took into consideration the lack of inventory that we were going to see.
yeah, I mean, it's funny, like you said, like back to normalcy. I don't even remember what normalcy is.
Right.
Interesting, right? Like, okay, so I don't know what normalcy is to you. I guess normalcy to me would be where we see listings averaging maybe somewhere between 25 and 35 actual days on market, not on market, in contract and closed. Um, where we see what 2 to 3% appreciation on a year by year basis, maybe that
Right.
is that even aggressive?
Yeah.
Um,
So that's a good point. Let me show you this next slide here. The sort of the normalcy, right? And you look at this is just listings data. So this shows the previous Augusts of 2019 and beyond that. So 19, 18, 17. These are what like a normal August would have in listings numbers. And look at where we're at for 2023.
yeah,
Like
yeah. I mean,
significant, right? And so, I don't care what experts say, like real estate is just supply and demand, right? It's just supply and demand. So the interest rates went up. That certainly curbed some demand from buyers, but we still had enough buyers out there, but there just wasn't anybody listing their house.
well, that's kind of it though. I mean, it curbs some buyers, but it's curbing far too many sellers from wanting to get in. So it's a weird conundrum of going from. I mean, I refied at 2.49, and that didn't feel like that long ago. And now we're sitting here on the cusp of 8. I just feel like when you have things that happen, like when you go from real hot to real cold real fast, what happens? A tornado. Like it's a weird analogy, but I just feel like it went so fast and things haven't been able to like catch up and inventory is nowhere near caught up, obviously. And I don't know
Yeah.
how long it's going to take to get there. And, um, certainly pandemic related stuff had a lot to do with inventory levels and people not changing jobs and moving and schools and everything else. That stuff's not really all that relevant anymore, but the effects are still lingering. So I think it goes to show like there's more to it than just pandemic related stuff, right? There's more pieces to this puzzle for sure.
Well, you mentioned interest rates, right? So you can see here current interest rates about 7.25. But look at this graph down below where you've got the majority of people are locked in an interest rate less than 5%. Like the amount of mortgages that make up over 6% are so small. So everybody who out there that's maybe considering listing their house, they have to play that numbers game where like, hey, I'm at 4%, and I do want to buy a bigger house. I need a bigger house, but man, my affordability is now lower because I've got to get locked into a 7.5 or 7.25 interest rate. That's got. I mean, this has got to be the number one thing, right? Like, I don't think we have an interest rate problem. I think we have an inventory problem, but those two are so closely related that people are so locked into these lower mortgage rates that they're just rethinking their decision to sell their home.
Well, it's hard too because with the interest rates, obviously you're talking about affordability, and you look at like here in Cleveland, isn't it so relevant though? I mean, I don't want to seclude one group, but like your run of the mill first time home buyer, maybe looking to start a family or a small family who wants space, have had a hard time affording a lot of space in an area that they deem, one with good schools or the things that a lot of people typically value. Their affordability's
Yeah,
dropped down so hard, and they're really not willing to give on square footage and location. So they're like, yeah, we'll wait, we'll wait, we'll wait.
yep,
How long are you gonna wait? How long are they gonna have to wait? Yeah, that's
I know.
interesting. That's a huge chunk of people locked into a really good, really good rate.
Correct.
Okay.
And I think all of this has led to the existing home sales year over year. I mean, you can see in the country, it's 16.5%. There's been less home sales this year as compared to last, but even in the Midwest where we're at, it's 20%. And I think that's data that you and I have seen. Like, we definitely have done less transactions this year. And I just think that most agents are saying the same things. Like, it's hard, like it's harder right now to work with buyers and to find anything that even matches what they're looking for.
Yeah, 16.6%. That's a big number, man.
It
Like,
is.
um, it is interesting. I think for us, I don't know what our like average home sale price is to this point. I feel like it's gone up since last year too, but
Yeah.
I mean that's a big number. The Northeast just pounded. Yeah.
Yep.
Um, those are big numbers. This one's big.
Correct.
Okay. You're speaking my language here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is
Yeah.
telltale.
So
Yeah.
this is a big one. We've talked about this. If you look at it, and it's wild, Josh, because like I can almost before I even saw this chart, I could almost pinpoint when buyers kind of started to slow down, and it's always seasonal, right? You always get this towards the end of summer where it's a little bit slower. So maybe this has a lot to do with seasonality. But if you look at like the latter part of July all the way through August, with the exception of 1 week, mortgage applications went down, right? Less people applying for mortgages, which is a direct result of interest rates.
Yeah. Some of those numbers are rather significant. And I saw this maybe a week or two ago. I think it was one of our lending partners had posted this, like just the amount of loan officers in general. I know we saw the run of the mill typical layoffs of the refinance folks, which is like very cyclical, comes and goes, right? But not even taking into account that just like your career loan officer, those numbers are down
Yeah.
significantly. down
Yeah.
significantly, um, which is also interesting. Um, yeah, I mean, when it's pretty clear you've got less people going for mortgages. Why is that? Well, I mean, we're getting into an interesting part of the year too. We're getting into like budget for holiday mode. There's a bunch of stuff going on. You got fall sports. You've got, for those with kids, like you've got footballs and soccer and everything else. Basketball's kicking off. You know, the Browns are back on, baby. They're winning. People just have things going on and they're thinking about, okay, in the coming months, we've got to spend here and we might as well just wait and see. And then, next year, maybe will be our year. But this data, like when you go back to June, what is it, June 2018, like, wow, that's significant. Those changes.
Yeah. Yep.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's
It's
not
it's
June
interesting.
2018, that's June 18th.
Yeah.
Okay.
These are weekly.
But, okay,
Yeah.
all right.
But
That
look,
makes sense.
yeah. So
Yeah.
look at July 16th. It went up, and then from there, every single week except for last week, I guess now it's 2 weeks ago, it has been decrease. Right.
Yeah,
And
but
so
4.2%. The
a lot.
When you look
That's a
at what the
lot.
number I would love to know what the actual number of loan applications are. That's a big number.
Oh, it
Gosh,
really is.
I'd love to boil that down into Ohio or Cleveland
Right.
or something.
So more locally, here's the housing market statistics for our county. And you can see like there's a number of different things here that jump out at me. You mentioned earlier like the average sales price. We're right around 270,000. But that's a 5.1% increase year over
Yeah,
year. So
that's
that's about what I expected, right? It's not as high as the last 2 years, but it definitely didn't go down. It's definitely not flat, even though sales are down, right? You can see like closed sales down 18.5% year over year.
yeah. I mean, homes are still selling. They're selling quickly
Yep.
in most places, I would say. I know we'll probably get into some areas. I'm sure people are wanting to know, like, well, where might we find some that maybe it's a little stagnant starting to, I think we can get into that. But yeah, some of these numbers are
Crazy.
really intriguing. Um, I mean, down 8%, pending sales, 2003 down 8%, closed sales down 18.5%. But
Yeah,
look
it's
at that, days on market until sale up 15%. So homes are staying on the market a
correct.
little bit longer, right? Which I think is true in 80% of Cuyahoga County. I feel like if you took the last 3 months, I would say that 80% of Cuyahoga County surrounding areas has seen maybe the average days on market, like truly on market, a week or two, at least, I think, in a short sample size, you know?
it just feels like it, like with buyers and sellers that we're working with, it feels like it's starting to kind of shift, right? Like to where, look, there's still going to be those houses out there that are priced really well, that are in great condition. They're going to sell quickly, right?
Yeah.
We just had one out in Middleburg Heights, right? That just it had what, four offers on it, but
Yeah.
that seems to be now. If this would have happened 2 months ago, that thing might have got 10 offers on instead of
Mhm.
four. So it start to see, and all of this data is showing us that less buyers are entering the market because of those interest rates. So mortgage applications are down, but that explains it, right? You have less competition, but because the listings are still so low, the prices aren't going anywhere.
Well, I mean, I think it's going to be a hard shift, and we might be on the cusp of it. I think these conversations, enlisting conversations, and talking about valuation is starting to change because some of these numbers are becoming relevant. You can show data to a seller or prospective seller that says, "Hey, look, 3 months ago, average days on market were different, in particular in this area." And I think that the more and more those conversations are had and the more data we see, we're going to start to see these sales skewed from what we've seen. I mean, you saw some of these, 50, 60, 70, 80,000 over ask is nowhere near as common. Um, so a little less aggressive in a lot of these areas, still relevant in some, here locally, like, your Rocky Rivers, Lake Woods, these places, like they'll be the last to get there, I think. But Strongsville's one still super hot. So yeah, it's interesting. But I have seen it. I've seen it personally in our listings, man. Like we've shot pretty aggressive, thinking, well, who knows? Maybe we haven't lost it yet. And that mindset for sellers is going to be there and linger for a while, for sure.
Well, they've heard for so long how great the market is and how much they can sell their house for, and
Yeah.
they still can't, but they need to be smarter about it today. So let's talk about current market. It's September. We're about to roll into what is this, Q4, right? Um, Last year, Q4, I remember, I think we even did a video on this channel about like, whoa, guess what? Like seller paid closing costs are back and price drops. And I think maybe I'm wrong. I want to get your thoughts on this, but I think we're maybe heading towards that a little bit, and it maybe not be as aggressive as it was last year. But like, I think this, if I'm a buyer, right? If I'm a buyer, this might be a good time for me to maybe find that deal, and have less competition because there are less people, less new buyers entering the market.
I agree with you. We've had a few here as of recent where we've been able to get creative with asking for closing costs and doing some things that are just not typical for the last 3 years. That is kind of nice. The idea of a 2-1 buyback on your interest rate and running those closing costs into purchasing that and giving yourself some wiggle room for the next 2 years while things hopefully stabilize, I think are all relevant conversations that I know a lot of our partners out there are having. Like I'm getting those calls from other agents saying, "Hey, we're looking at doing this. We want to use these closing costs to do a buyback." And I think that's really productive as agents when we're having that dialogue, that's spreading that word, that creativity that we can take advantage of. I think it is a sign of what normal times are like, which will be really interesting when we actually get there and people are negotiating again. That'll be fun, but certainly relevant. I think the difference, though, in what maybe people from a mindset standpoint, especially if you're like an aggressive buyer, whether you're moving and you need to move quickly, or if you're buying and you're investing, doesn't necessarily mean you're going to go well below ask price and then get all your closing costs and get your cake and eat it too. I just simply don't think we're there for the majority of this area, but we're certainly seeing where you can be very much more realistic about it and tactful about it. Still get what you want, get it at a decent price, but leverage some of those tools, closing costs, etc., to position yourself better financially in the short term.
Yeah, I agree. It's still a seller's market, no matter how you look at it. The inventory is still low. You have a lot less leverage as a buyer still, even if some of these things are trending in your direction. So let's talk sellers. We've had some conversations with our sellers recently. Um, what would be your piece of advice to people out there considering selling their home?
Well, I don't know that maybe in the peak of like crazy low interest in the middle of summer, hot, 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 like where it was almost like name your price type stuff. That's to me an anomaly. I still think pricing your home appropriately and appropriate for the time and the economic climate, and taking advantage of that first window, that first breakthrough where, oh, new inventory, here we go, and creating a positive sentiment like, oh, okay, that's a reasonable price, I can justify that, is so important. And getting away from that mindset of let's go for the gusto and who cares. I mean, I realize there are always going to be sellers that say, well, I don't have to sell. Let's see if we can get it. Perfectly fine. That's your MO. That's cool. Go for it. But for the run of the mill seller that's motivated to sell, you're buying something else, you have to move. Pricing it reasonably and then leveraging the negotiation tactics in when you have all of that activity is paramount. It's the number one thing outside of having a clean, presentable home that's attractive to buyers and is something that people get a good feeling about.
Yeah, people are so smart today. Buyers are so educated. They are on Zillow constantly. They check numbers. They understand the market so that when they see a house that's in their minds overpriced, they instantly go into that showing with this thing better be perfect. And when it's not, they automatically tell their agent, this thing's too high, man. They gotta drop the price. And the story that I like to tell happened again recently with one of our listings that we were listed. I think it was like 262, and we were getting some feedback, and people were like, "Oh, it's a little bit high." So we dropped the price to 249, and we got multiple offers, and it went over 249 into the 250s with like cash deal. Like it was just that hesitancy. People say, "Oh, it's over 250, it's too high." Like there's a psychology behind pricing these things, and when we as your agent say, "This is where we think you're going to get the biggest bang for your buck," it's not. We're not just throwing a number at them. We're thinking about this psychologically. Like, what do buyers think, and what are they going to think when they come into your home? And if they automatically think it's overpriced, then you're working backwards trying to get them right. So pricing it correctly out the jump, you're going to save everybody time and you're going to make more money by doing it that way, as opposed to that scenario where you have to drop it and then hope people are still interested in it at that price. And it's just crazy, man. Like the number you pick is so important.
It is. It's very important. And if you price appropriately right now, despite interest rates, there are more than enough people eager and waiting. But the conversations I'm hearing more often now than I have in a long time is I'm buying at a premium rate and they're asking a premium price and they paid this 8 years ago and I can't justify turning that over. Like it doesn't make sense to me. It's not perfect to your point. And that's becoming more relevant. Um,
Yeah.
it just is. It's a part and buyers are smart. They have more access to data. They're savvier. And I think agents are getting savvier too. I'll give agents credit as well. I think there are a lot of agents that are having good conversations and educating their buyers on this stuff. So yeah, you sellers out there, if you're motivated, show you're motivated. Just hire an agent that can negotiate and will negotiate to make up for that as much as you can.
Yeah. An agent that understands these trends, that understands the numbers, because you have to kind of have an idea for what's the bigger picture in our market, right? Obviously, real estate's local, and we all can run a CMA and find out what your house is worth and what other homes have sold for, and say, okay, well, your neighbor's house sold for this. It had 3 bedrooms, you have 4. This is what it's worth. Like we can all do that, but what good agents can do is give you the data that's, hey, guess what? Mortgage applications are down and listings are down. And here's how you capitalize on that, right? If your number one concern is buyers are nervous about interest rates, let's offer them closing costs so they can buy down that rate. Like having these conversations, you should be having these conversations, is what I'm saying, with your agent, because that's how you market your property. It's not, hey, just put a number up and put pictures on the MLS and it's going to sell. You have to be more educated than that today to be successful. And if you want to sell your house quickly and for the most money, you need to have an agent that's educated.
Nailed it.
All right, last but not least, always an important topic for our folks out there, the investors. What are you seeing on the investing side here as we approach Q4?
I feel like I know a lot of our investors are probably going to tune in here, ones that we've been working with successfully, unsuccessfully. I think the investors have, for the most part, had a pretty rough go over the last year or two. Like, I feel for you, Burr people out there. That's been
Yeah,
a tough nut to crack. I've had plenty of conversations, and we've hit the pavement, and I haven't been able to find a whole heck of a lot. I guess when we're talking about on market stuff that has enough juice for the squeeze on a true burr and making it work. There are some people that are creative with, we'll say, like a healthy abundance of resources. They have local connections and stuff, and they tend to, you know, see a more favorable outcome here. But what I see right now with the investors is this: we're a heavily saturated multifamily area in general. I think we can thank the steel industry and manufacturing and the boom town that Cleveland was a long time ago when they built these homes. That's what they were built for, to accommodate that. We've always had that. And I've never really felt like inventory in that space was too big of a problem until now. And I think it's so extremely light. And I think it's a collection of buildup of so many people trying to get in and inventory simply not catching up. Um, there's just not a whole heck of a lot of like true good duplexes and tries. And think about a quad that there are barely any reputable quads that come available. If they do, they're $60,000 in
hmm.
areas that people may not want to be in, or they're in Ohio City, Tremont, and they're six, seven, $800,000. And there's so few in between there. If there are, they've got problems. They've got zoning issues. They're not lead compliant, and we've we've got to this place on these investment properties where all these initiatives, I think the lead thing was kind of huge from a sentiment because it's like you have to do it and most people haven't. And it's just one other hurdle that you've got to get through. Um, it's a challenging time for investors, but I'll tell you, we've had a great year selling to investors, man. Like
Yeah,
we've met so many motivated ones that I think understand the numbers and understand they're not great right now as a whole, and even as great as people make Cleveland out to be, they understand it. They come in with a mindset. They're going to make improvements. They're going to raise rents, but they're going to justify raising them. And those are the ones that I think are thriving. And they hire good property management, and their headaches are gone, and they're able to focus their efforts on their lives and on continuing to build their portfolio. So it is tough. I hope we come out of the rut that we're in from an investment standpoint, which I think we will. But it's a little challenging right now.
yeah. We've had a lot of conversations with our investors, like, here's what to expect, high cash flow, low appreciation versus low cash flow, high appreciation. But the seasoned investor understands that even as challenging as it is here in Cleveland, it's still almost better than any other market because the affordability, the rents, the rental, the people that rent here, like there's so much going for it. But I think a lot of investors get so impatient, right? They come into this and they think, oh, I'm going to find a house in 1 week or 2 weeks, and it just doesn't happen. You need to be in it kind of for the long haul and continue to monitor it and be ready to go when it does. You do find a really good deal. Um, but yeah, it's been tough for them. And, I have really seen a move not necessarily away from multifamily housing, Josh, because as what you just mentioned, but like maybe just towards single family homes because there are some really affordable neighborhoods that are, I think, very desirable to live in that are getting really good rents and at really low entry points from a purchase standpoint. So, we can talk to some of you folks out there about those areas that we really like that we've helped folks buy properties in. That single family might be the way to go.
Well, as the owner of a multifamily, I can tell you it does come with challenges. Um, I would, yeah, learning lesson for me and as myself, and then at working with people, I'm way pickier on multifamilies. And I would be too if I were you. I'd be way pickier on multifamilies. I would lean towards getting into some newer ones if I could, and alleviating some of those capital costs that come with owning a multifamily when you have mechanicals, HVAC, you've got two, one or two roof, they're bigger, whatever the case may be. I love the single family portfolio building strategy. I think it's brilliant here in a few areas that we've talked ad nauseum about, because the purchase price to rent, like the you 1% truthers out there will have a heyday in some of these areas, buying single family, 3 bed, 2 bath homes. And they're still in abundance here. You can get them, you can scoop them up. You're just not going to get them for 20, 30, 40,000 below ask right away, but
Right.
they're here. And I love that approach. If you're heading into the end of this year, looking into early next year, into what is our traditional, like our slower time, I think you might be able to scoop up some nice single family deals in this fall winter time span, which I love. They're a lot safer.
Yeah, I'd fully agree with that. I think this is a good time of year to be looking at some investment properties here because those properties might sit a little bit longer in the winter months and you can really find some deals. So yeah, I mean, overall, Josh, I think this market is shifting ever so slightly, right? It's not going to be a buyer's market anytime soon, but it's definitely kind of shifting in that direction. I think Q4 can be a really good time to buy a home. Whether you're an investor or you're an owner occupant, I think it's going to be very similar to what we saw last year in October, November, December, where traditionally people don't think about it. We've already seen the mortgage applications are down. Like this could be a time that you do find your deal, even though it's not going to be 10% under asking price or 20% under asking price.
Yeah.
And on the flip side, for sellers, Josh, I think they need to be aware of timing and on price. We mentioned it earlier about be realistic with your listing price and be smart about it. Consider the psychological aspect of that number. Understand there's less buyers because of the interest rates. So, like, be strategic, but you're still sitting in a seller's market. If you do the right things, it's going to sell. Anything I'm missing to recap?
No, I think to me, winter time's the best. Yeah. Like, don't be the person that waits to get your gym membership until January. Get it now,
Sure.
right? Start looking now when everybody else doesn't want to move in the winter, or when they don't want to have to go out and show homes or look at homes in the winter and drive around in the snow. Like, those are all factors that are completely relevant here. I hear it all the time. New year, new me. And if you want to buck the trend and position yourself advantageously, I think it's time to look more seriously now than it was before. Look, I understand the challenges that come with that, especially if you have to put a little money into your home, and it's hard to get a crew out there to do patios and decks and roofs and stuff. I get it. Um, Patch those things up, hold it in until, if you can, until the spring, line that stuff up, you'll be in good shape. But I definitely would be uh, bucking that trend if I were looking to get into the market anytime soon and not wait. Because come January, it's going to be, I think it'll be chaotic like it normally is. Like, February is always a huge month for us, isn't it? January, February, it's big,
It is.
historic. Yeah.
Yeah, it just goes up from there. So consider that if you're thinking about buying in this market, this is a really good time to get started. I think that's it, Josh. Appreciate you coming on. As usual, we will have all of our information in the description box below. Listen, if you are buying or selling in Cleveland, you know what to do. Reach out to us below when you're ready to buy or sell.
You're